Tiny Dot here, ready to read the last chapter of Steinbeck's Ghost, chapter 18. The wind had died. Outside Travis's window, the world was still, and quiet ruled the house. The Santa Lucias were a dark blue gash against the golden ocean-inspired sunset. It was cooler outside, too. Travis could feel the first bite of true autumn hovering at his window. He knew his astronomy. The world had turned, and the shadows stretched ahead, and the days would be shorter. At dinner, he could barely keep his eyes open, and there was a moment when he thought maybe the mashed potatoes would make a nice pillow. It was just him and his parents, but they'd been up at the corral all day with Hill and his parents and Oscar and Miss Bab. They had explored and talked, all of them together, and then they talked some more. When he and his parents got home, they had a lovely dinner. His mom's burgers were even better than Sheila's, and things felt pretty good. But there'd been so many words that day, so many stories, and he needed the quiet. His parents, too, Travis could tell, thought the quiet was pretty nice. He excused himself and went to his room and sat at his desk in his window and enjoyed the silence for an hour. He looked out the window and stared at the Santa Lucias. After some time, his thinking slowed down enough that he could make out individual words and sentences, his brain no longer a whirl of voices. He pulled open the top desk drawer where he'd stashed the ghostwriter's composition book and opened it to the first page. He read the words he'd scribbled on Halloween with Hill. The night of the floating lanterns. The night so bright, even Bella Linda Terrace is beautiful. Halfway to home with a good friend. Then he turned to the second page, where nothing was yet written. He pulled out a black pilot rolling ball, slid the drawer shut, then turned down the desk lamp, scooted in his chair, and began to write. For no good reason at all, he began at the end. It seemed the best place. We all went to the corral the next day, he wrote. We had to. The minute I woke up, I told my parents we had to go back to the corral. The night before, I told them everything that had happened with Johnny Bear and Tularecito and the story of the Mexican farmer's lynching. And we stayed up for a long time talking about it. My parents didn't understand much more than I did about the story. So in the morning, when I told them I wanted to go back to the corral, they said, yes, we had to. And just then, Hill called and asked me if I wanted to go back. It was killing him. He was going to go with his parents no matter what I said. Then I called Oster, and he practically shouted yes. And he said he'd call Miss Bab because she should come too. And that was the best idea of a morning full of good ideas. Everyone needed to go there. Travis wrote quickly, the ink flowing across the page, smearing, and he wasn't sure he'd be able to read it all, but it was important to get it down. He needed to write it down. He'd promised Oster he would. So we packed lunches and headed out to the corral, to the same place Oster and Hill and I had stopped before. where we always stopped, the dead end. We drove in different cars, but got there around the same time. We stood around the cars talking, and now that there were more of us, the talking couldn't be stopped. What happened in the cave? What did it mean? Was it real? Everyone had to know. Then we hiked up to the cave, practically running up the ravines. We sort of looked for the plateau where we'd found, or thought we'd found, Steinbeck's initials carved in that one tree. But there wasn't anything like it, and we didn't have time to look harder. We knew that the answers, if there were going to be any answers, were hidden in the cave. Travis looked at the white paper, its faint blue lines, watched the black ink unfurl from the pen like smoke from a chimney in a high wind. But that's not what he saw when he wrote. As he wrote the words, he saw what they'd seen that day, what they'd all said, the hillsides rushing beneath their feet. When they got to the cave, it was empty. The fire pit was there, obviously fresh, but there were no other signs of what had happened. The walls of the cave, even under the gaze of several flashlight beams, looked like the walls of a cave. No sign of Tularecito's drawings. There were smudges, a few, but it was hard to tell if they were the ash smudges of Tularecito's drawings or some other kind of smudge. Cave smudge? At first, Miss Bab, Hill's parents, and Travis's parents stayed near the entrance of the cave. Travis could tell they wanted him and Hill and Oster to have the first look. Then Hill saw the circle and pointed to it. But the only thing there, the only real evidence, was this sort of lack of evidence. A big circle of swept dirt, right where the statue of Johnny Bear had been, and where there was no statue, no leftover rocks at all, was a perfect circle swept into the floor of the cave, just the right size for the statue. It was too perfect a circle. You could just see that. Someone had left this circle for us. It was too perfect. We weren't disappointed at all. When Travis saw the circle, he looked up at Oster and then at Hill, and they were all looking at one another, and they were all smiling. In this perfect circle of nothing, they found all the evidence they needed. As Travis wrote, his head was filled with a million other things he wanted to write about the circle. But he was writing too fast, didn't have time for it all. These words would be a good bookmark. He could come back to them later, he knew, and know his millions of thoughts would return. He was writing so fast, he felt like he wasn't moving the pen. The pen moved itself. The pages filled up. They showed everyone else the circle, and they all agreed that it was a sign of some kind. Miss Bab looked positively giddy. Travis's mom looked a little freaked out. All of them scoured the cave for more evidence. But there was nothing, not a single footprint. And the back of the cave, where Chularecito had come from, well, that narrowed down to a crack about 6 inches wide. When Travis put his ear to the crack, he heard nothing but the whoosh of deep and dark spaces. They left the cave and climbed to the top of the sandstone bluff, where the day was perfect and cool, and there were some nice big stones for sitting on. And they broke out their picnic. They ate and thought and stared out into the corral and back toward Salinas. They could see everything from up here, the whole world. Then they talked. Travis stopped writing for a minute. He smoothed down the page he'd been writing with the palm of his hand, heard the crunch and swish of the half-blank paper. He wanted to remember as precisely as he could what each of them had said. The pen moved again under his hand. First, Miss Bab made them go over the whole story, from the very first visit with Oscar and Travis to the second visit when they took Hill along. So Oscar and Travis and then Hill told that story. But then Hill made them all back up, and they had to talk about Gitano and the Watchers, and of course, Steinbeck's ghost. Hill's and Travis's parents and Miss Bab all had that look on their faces that you see when people are listening to, well, ghost stories. But this story, ghost or not, Travis knew they believed. Travis wrote, then Hill's dad started to talk, and he told us stories his grandfather told him about how badly the white farmers had treated the Mexicans when he was a kid, and even later. Then Oster spoke up, and he told us about his research into the corral and how he'd read newspaper stories of lynchings in and around Salinas. Some of the lynchings, he said, hadn't happened that long ago, just before World War II. Then we all talked about the horrible things that people did to each other. Hill and I listened a lot during this part, all the grown-ups talking, and somehow the whole afternoon filled up with all this talking. Travis looked down at his composition book, then at his clock. 2 hours had passed, and he'd already filled 21 pages. He started to write again. Miss Bab finally asked the question everyone wanted to ask. We all believed this had happened. I could just tell, but she wanted to know. We all wanted to know. What did it mean? So Oster and Hill and me, we told them what we'd been saying all last night and all today, that Steinbeck had one more story to tell. We just couldn't figure out why us. What had it to do with the library? Why now? And none of us had any good answers. We finally agreed that we might never know. But we agreed it had happened. Then Miss Bab said the thing everyone was thinking. Will you guys? She said, and she pointed to me and Oster and Hill. You have to write it all down. We don't want to disappoint Mr. Steinbeck. The sun had gone down. Night was on, but Travis could still make out the rough silhouette of the Santa Lucias. He was suddenly tired, but he had to keep writing. So we went back to the cave for just one more look, but just me and Hill and Oster, and we stood around the circle and made a promise that each of us would write down everything that had happened. We promised not to forget. Then we came home. Travis didn't think he could write any more. He knew it was late. He knew he had to get to sleep, had school tomorrow. He knew that this was just the beginning, too. It would take him a long time to write it all down, every single thing that had happened in the last few weeks, every detail. But he would, and not just because of the promise. Travis had made another promise in the cave to himself. He would write everything down so that Oster could use it. He was going to make sure Oster would write his second book. Make sure he'd use the story of Steinbeck's ghost. Make sure it was never forgotten. Travis started to close the cover of the composition book, but a word popped into his head. The word he'd been looking for when Miss Bab asked what it all meant. Silence, he wrote in clear, slow letters, and he hunched over the blank pages. It's about silence. Steinbeck was silent about the real story he knew, and it haunted him. And there was this silence in Bella Linda Terrace that almost killed me until I remembered the word Camazotz. And Oster let himself be quiet because someone else told him to be. And Hill and I were almost not friends because I couldn't talk to him. My parents, too, they let the silence of their jobs shut up their real selves. And if the library closes, then all those books and all those words, they'll be silent forever. You can't let that kind of silence into the world. Make a noise. He closed the book, but didn't put it in the desk drawer. He pushed it to one corner of the desk, where he knew it would be ready for him tomorrow. Travis never expected the benefit reading to be the monumental success it turned out to be. The Maya Cinema donated one of its theaters for the evening, and all 250 tickets sold out the day they went on sale. People came from all over Salinas and from as far away as San Francisco and Los Angeles at $100 a ticket, and thanks to the sales of books after the program, the Save Our Library Committee was able to donate $29,730 to Rally Salinas. On the night of the reading, everyone had dinner together at Sheila's. Travis and his parents, Hill and his parents, Miss Bab and her husband and children, and Oster. The whole gang, Travis wrote the next day in his composition book. Sheila picked up their tab. There was noise and chatter and laughing all during dinner. Afterward, they walked down Main Street to the theater, where the marquee read in huge letters, "Save Our Library." 4 floodlights scraped across the sky. It was a gala, Miss Babs said, a regular extravaganza. She was glad so much attention was focused on the library, but she still thought it was a little too much pimadiddle for a library. She looked forward to the day, she said, when going to work wasn't about saving the world, but just another day at the library. There were 3 special guests that night, authors of beloved books for younger readers, E.L. Konigsberg, Ursula K. Le Guin, and Lawrence Yep, who, being from nearby Pacific Grove, was the headliner. Each of the writers had paid their own way to be part of the benefit. But before the 3 main readers, there were 2 others, Hill and Travis. Miss Babb had asked them both if they'd choose a section from one of their favorite books to share with the audience. Travis and Hill pretended to be shy for about 7 seconds each before they agreed to participate. Miss Babb wanted to thank them for all their work on the committee and to remind everyone in the attendance that the library was about readers. Hill read the Camazotz section from A Wrinkle in Time, and even though it's not a particularly funny section, he had everyone in stitches. He had a magic voice like that. He made everyone in the audience see the absurdity of a world where everything was exactly the same. Travis, of course, read from Corral de Tierra. He had tried and tried to get Oster to read, but there was no budging him. Oster told Travis he felt as if the book belonged more to Travis than to him. He hadn't told Oster he was going to read from Corral de Tierra until dinner, the night of the reading, by which time he knew it would be too late for Oster to complain. Much to his surprise, though, Oster didn't object. In fact, he seemed delighted. Travis could swear that Oster was blushing. The crowd that night seemed enormous from behind the curtains, but Travis wasn't nervous at all. He was holding the library's only copy of Corral de Tierra, which was now like an old friend to him. He read 2 short sections, one about the frog hunt, which had people in tears with laughter, and the climactic scene when Steinbeck's sister Mary is bitten by a rattlesnake. During this section, Travis thought, if this were a book, you could hear a pin drop. But he surprised himself by adding 1 section to the reading at the last moment, the book's last paragraphs. He made the decision while he was on stage. A sudden inspiration. These had always been among his favorite words in the entire book. Steinbeck sitting in his attic bedroom window and longing to go back to the corral. After everything that had happened, it seemed impossible to leave this scene out. He was reading these words not so much for the audience or for Oster or even himself, but for something bigger. He was reading these as a tribute to the boy in the window. John regarded the books scattered around his desk. How much he had loved them all. La Morte d'Arthur, Treasure Island, the Aeneid, the rest. No, these books were not life, he knew, and now that he'd seen life so much more close up in the corral with his sister nearly dying, he knew more than ever that books did not take the place of real life. But books were important, too. Hadn't they taken him out of his quiet family home and led him into the real world? Without these books, he'd have never gone out there. Outside the window, the dark shape of the Santa Lucias called to him quietly but powerfully. He would return there some day, and soon. John picked up his pen and began to write. The audience loved it, and at the book table, after the readings, people kept asking to buy Corral de Tierra and seemed shocked that it was not available. Travis was happy to be done with his part of the reading. That way, he got to listen to the other readers. Ursula K. Le Guin transported the audience to another world with an excerpt from The Tombs of Atuan, and E. L. Königsberg delighted everyone with a few pieces from The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. At last, Miss Babb introduced Lawrence Yep, who read from his novel Dragon Wings about Chinese immigrants during the great San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Yep read the passage where Moonshadow experienced the earthquake, which bounced him out of bed at dawn. Travis looked around the audience and saw people everywhere looking up and around during the reading, clutching the arms of their seats. When Yep read, the building seemed to crack and twist, the floor to heave and buckle. The earthquake was happening all over again. Travis' only disappointment that night was that he hadn't finished the story for Oster. He wanted to hand over the composition book after the reading, a present for Oster, but he wasn't even halfway through. The more he wrote, the more he remembered. Just the night before, he'd remembered how he found Oster's phone number right there in the phone book. This detail didn't change the story, he knew, but it was important to the story, and he was glad he remembered it. The whole gang went to Marianne's for ice cream after the reading, where Miss Babb flat out asked Hill, Oster, and Travis if they had finished their stories yet. Each of them half mumbled that they were still working on them, and it was clear to Travis that they were, and that there was plenty of time. 2 weeks after the reading, Travis' dad's band played a benefit gig for the Save Our Library Committee at Listen and Be Heard, an artsy coffee house out by the junior college. His dad had rounded up the Knot Band for the gig. They hadn't played together in over a year, but every night for a week they rehearsed in Travis' living room and were starting to sound pretty good. Listen and Be Heard was filled with goofy looking college students that night. The whole gang was there too. Travis loved seeing his dad's old friends on stage again. They played the usual stuff. Old guy music, they called it. Dylan and Neil Young and Joni Mitchell. And that night at Listen and Be Heard, they were hot. Ray Jim John punished his electric guitar. Cutlet Sam sang through the harmonica. Dave Tilton laid down the law on bass, and Big Gun Burge conga drummed his way to heaven. Travis thought his dad's voice was as good as it had ever been. For the last song, his dad brought Travis to the tiny stage. They'd been practicing a new piece together. Travis was really getting the hang of rhythm guitar and thought he might take lessons soon. The song was a surprise for his mom. Luz de mi vida by Los Lobos. Travis and his dad kind of lost their way in the middle for a few bars, but found their way back to the groove by the end. It was way cool. When Travis came off stage, he sat with Hill alone at a table in the corner. You know, Big T, Hill said, you play guitar almost as good as I play soccer. I had no idea. That rocked. You should have seen your mom. She was trying real hard not to cry. I hope you write like you play. You too, Travis said. So you done yet? You must be joking, Senor Ruizo. I don't know about you, but the more I write, the more I write. It's weird. Tell me about it. They stared at each other, knew what each other was thinking. Okay, Hill said. As soon as I'm done, I'll show you. Ernie, too. Deal. They shook one more Camazot's handshake. After the gig, Travis and his dad counted up the money in the tip jar. A whopping $212.79. There's got to be more, his dad said. I mean, that's just not very much. Dad, Travis said, that's not what matters. It's not this one thing that's going to save the world. It's this one small thing and that one small thing and all the others. The small thing here, it's part of something much bigger. His dad had to agree with him. On that first Tuesday in March, Measure 5 was passed by the voting citizens of Salinas. 67% in favor, 33% opposed, with a 2/3 majority required. Close, but enough. And that was all that mattered. The city would increase its sales tax by 1/2 of 1 penny, and the new money would be used to restore city services that had been cut. A large portion of the money, as written into the measure, would keep the library open. The entire Save Our Library committee watched the election returns on TVs at the library. It wasn't until almost midnight that victory was assured, and when the announcement was made, a great whooping broke out. Travis looked around for Miss Babb, but she was nowhere to be seen. He found her a while later in the kids section, curled up fast asleep in one of the old corduroy beanbag chairs. The victory wasn't a total one, of course. The library would stay open, but with a greatly reduced staff and with minimal hours. But it would stay open, and they, the city, the librarians, the citizens, would continue to work on behalf of the library and its books. Whatever it takes, Travis, Miss Babs said. We'll keep working. The fight's not over yet. Travis and Oster, and Hill too, when he didn't have soccer, continued to work on the committee. Travis and Oster both worked afternoons at the library as volunteer shelvers. Travis had never figured that putting books back in their proper places could be so much fun. He kept discovering books he never knew existed. He seemed to bring home as many as he shelved. One afternoon, when they were both working in the kids section, Travis picked up the library's only copy of Corral de Tierra. Look, he said, you're popular again. Oster laughed, looked away. He seemed embarrassed, which Travis thought was weird. Travis needed to say something. He did. Remember, he said, when we were up in the corral that day after, and we all promised to write down what we saw, everything? Yes, and Oster kept shelving. So, have you been doing that? Yes, yes, I have. Oster stopped shelving and pointed a book at him. And you? Have you been writing it all down? I have, tons, but I'm not quite finished yet. Good. It's supposed to take time. I'm glad you're doing it, though. Travis still wasn't finished with his version of what happened last fall, but he was close. He was dying to share it with Oster. Hill, Travis knew, was almost done, too. Remember, Travis said, when you were talking about Steinbeck's ghost, the book, your second book, you said you'd got it wrong somehow. And Hill said you should finish that book, that he knew it'd be a better book this time. Yes, I remember. So, are you working on that book too? Are you going to put the cave in that book? What happened to us? Oscar grunted. So, Travis asked. Oster looked at him. Well, he said, I have been. Writing, that is. Steinbeck's ghost. I think I figured it out. What was wrong? I've been working on it a little bit. And, yes, the cave's gonna be in there. After I check it out with you and Hill, of course. Why didn't you tell me? Didn't want to jinx it. So how far? Oster put a finger to his lips. Don't want to jinx it. That afternoon, Travis and Oster said goodbye in the alley, and Oster drove off to Spreckles. Travis stood a long time in the alley, waiting for something. For what? It was too quiet out. It was a sunny day, almost warm. The rains had been thick and constant all winter, and the world was lush, exploding. The plum and apple and cherry trees had blossomed all at once, and the rain knocked those petals from the trees. The flowers were as thick as snow on the ground. The mountains, the Gabilans, and the Santa Lucias were so green the world seemed like a whole other planet. Travis got on his bike and pedaled hard out to Spreckles, the afternoon wind pushing him all the way there. He knew he'd be late for dinner, but his parents would come pick him up. Oster came to the door. "So, you've been writing?" Travis said. "I'd really like to hear some. Would you read me some? Some of Steinbeck's Ghost?" "I don't know, Travis," Oster said. "It's kind of a private thing." "A private thing?" he said. "Are you kidding me? Private? No, it's not. That's crazy." There was a last silence. "You're right," the writer said. "Come on in. I'll read you what I've got so far." The end. Okay, so now that we're through with that, maybe each of you has a book you would like to write. So get started.